Well, hi there, lovelies. Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I did the makeup for my character Ida Valkoi, who I played at the Vampire the Masquerade LARP called Darkness Emergent. I will be putting all of the products that I use in the description, and I will also be giving you a little bit of a story time on the backstory behind the character as we go through this little makeup video. So first of all, how did Ida come to be as a character? What was the inspiration behind her? I actually started making Ida as a one-shot character. I was going to play her in a one-shot called Love Bites on Magi RPG, so I definitely did not build her to be a long-term character. And when I was thinking of what type of character I wanted to play for this one-shot, I really wanted to play a Ravnos. And looking at the Ravnos as being daredevils, I quickly settled for some reason on the character of basically Celine from the Underworld franchise. She was a big inspiration behind this character. So with that in mind, I settled on this type of assassin spy character who used social manipulation to get where she needed to be to then physically take care of the problem. And that is how Ida came to be, because I also played her in a coterie and we needed some physical strength within it as well, because the other coterie mates, Dove, Khalil, and Viral, were definitely not physical characters. So her first appearance was in the Love Bites one-shot, where we basically had to be an escort. And then we also had the really nice opportunity to play an in-person game with the same coterie at PAX Unplugged last year, where the Marshall coterie, which was us, had the chance to meet the Lysander coterie, who was the main coterie basically of the ongoing chronicle on Magi RPG back then, called Ancestral Blood. We got to play another two-shot, where we basically were tasked by the prince to take care of some local Sabbat together with the Lysander coterie. And with the bonds that we made throughout this two-shot, it sparked the idea later on when we were planning for Darkness Emergent to happen that it would be a fun idea to bring these coteries to a LARP actually. So once we made the decision to bring these characters to the LARP, there was a question of, well, I have this character who I wrote to be just in a one-shot. I didn't write a whole lot of backstory for her. How do you change this so it's hefty enough to actually spend an entire weekend playing her? And that's when I really started building on her backstory and fleshing her out a little bit more than the Celine ripoff that she was before. So first of all, I looked at the character as I had written her before, and I thought, what do I want to keep? I wrote her as a Ravnos, a Camarilla Ravnos, so I was going to keep that, and I still had my coterie mates around me, being Dove and Khalil specifically for the LARP. And I had written Ida as this very moral person. Not that she's morally on the good side, but she definitely spends a lot of time thinking about morals and what is right and what is wrong, trying to make her own judgments in that. And basically from there, I decided to just flesh it out a little bit more. I had these very basic sentences written down about her personality before, but now I needed to think, okay, how did this personality actually come to be? What's the reason behind her actions in this current night? So I started the way I always like to do for vampire characters, which is look at their human life. Personally, I love writing long and detailed character backgrounds because when it's closer to the event itself, I can go through that backstory, read it like it's a book, and kind of imagine what this character went through and the way they think. So I started off with her human life, where it was 1949 and Ida was still known as Iveta Kovacs, one of many siblings in a kind of crime family. So Iveta grew up in an environment where she quickly had an overexposure to a lot of the bad sides of society, you know, bloodshed, death, all kinds of morally questionable behavior. She was exposed to it as a child already, which made her kind of desensitized from it all. She was just a sibling that was protected and had a legacy to pick up until a stranger approached her and, unbeknownst to her at that time, murdered off her family for a job. Iveta was then taken away from Hungary and just taken on the road to Europe by her now sire, but back then just guardian, Moran, who basically took up the position of bringing up Iveta as almost like her own child. Moran taught Iveta the ways that she lived, where she was this kind of problem solver. She just did what was necessary to do the jobs she was tasked to do, get the money, do the job, and get it over with. But Moran all did this on her own moral compass. She had made decisions about what was right and wrong in the world, and she told this to Iveta, who began to feel this kind of rage towards this unjust world, towards this rot that seemed to rule the world. But instead of becoming passionate about this, though, Moran taught Iveta that passion brought you nowhere, but it only served to dull your senses. However, Moran taught Iveta that it was way easier to take on this rot if you infiltrated it, if you made them not see your true intentions, adapted yourself to their ideal view so you could get as close as possible, and only then you would be able to take care of the problem. Iveta also eventually asked her mentor why she only came out at night, and about certain strange behaviors, which led to the point of her getting to know the society where Kindred were a thing. Skip a few years later to Scotland, where Iveta has had this rage boiling inside of her, this disgust towards the world and certain people who have all the power in it, and she decides to take matters into her own hands. They kind of spiral. She doesn't do a job cleanly, but she does ask Moran, as she is wounded, to basically give her the gift that she has, because that is how Iveta sees being Kindred. She sees it as a gift that would help her become stronger, become better, and be able to take on this rot in the world better. And she gets it. Moran embraces Iveta, and she then chooses a new name for herself. She starts calling herself Ida. The two of them leave Europe and they travel overseas, where they start taking on jobs together. Espionage, black market dealings, bodyguarding, assassination. Nothing was off the table for them. And on occasion, though, Ida, with her principles, would refuse jobs. She was going to make sure that no innocent person got the same fate as her. She believed that if you eliminate the scum before they could cause problems, then that was all she would do. No matter how long it took, no matter how low she needed to crawl, if it meant she had to pretend to be one of them, she would put her sense of self aside and take on whatever form she needed. She really believed that this was a vile world and no one else should get their hands dirty, so she would. And something that really just stuck to her ever since she was a child was this desensitization and not having use for passion or feelings because they just got in the way. And she had never learned to really process them, to give them any time of day. Now, being in Ravnos, she eventually decided to split ways with Moran, having come to a point where she wanted to find jobs of her own and chase her own goals, which led her to Chicago, where Ida quickly found a new way of working. A way where she was surrounded by other capable kindred whose potential she could place wherever she deemed fit. And this was the point of the backstory where I needed to flesh out the way she thought about the coterie mates that were also going to be present. So Dove and Khalil being placed into a coterie together by the local prince. Ida found something that she never had before, a friend, because although Dove seemed to be the standard toreador, as they started living together, Ida started seeing a softer side of Dove. Where Ida made very little room for emotions, Dove had an abundance of them. She cared a lot, but Dove hid it from people so they couldn't use it against them. And the two of them really connected, and in a way, Dove became Ida's connection to humanity, Ida's attempt almost at getting a bit of normalcy back into her own life. But the only thing that did bother Ida about Dove was her obsession, and when it got ugly. When Dove got so infatuated that she made rash, bold decisions, that she embraced other people, those were things and actions that Ida just had a really difficult time accepting. And then on the other hand, you had Khalil, who Ida had a way easier relationship with because she barely shared personal stuff with Khalil. The most they shared was doing jobs together and now and then having some small talk. Ida perhaps did this to prevent herself from having another emotional connection, and Ida also thought that this way Khalil was the only other reliable kindred in this group to get things done. So then their coterie, the Marshall coterie, gets tasked to do a job together with the Lysander coterie. And they take care of Malenkov, who is a Sabbat. And throughout this job, Ida also takes a liking to Willow, who is the Malkavian within the Lysander coterie, because Ida found her to be this innocent person who perhaps was doing stuff she needed to do, but the thing about Ida is within her own moral compass, she tries to evaluate whether or not someone deserved to be dragged into kindred life. And if someone was innocent in a way, blameless, she thinks that they didn't deserve to be dragged into all of this. And in Ida's opinion, Willow was one of these people. So immediately Ida got protective of Willow, which is what she does, which is why she would get her hands dirty for Willow, so Willow didn't have to. Writing out these different connections to other kindred really helped think about how Ida evaluates people, evaluates kindred, and how she emotionally puts herself in these relationships, right? She is a clear example of a kindred who never learned that her emotions are a good thing to have, and instead the entire opposite, learned that it was better to shut them out, and has learned that pretending to be manipulative to get into certain circles gets you way further to reach your goals. So that's the best way to act. In essence, Ida has difficulties connecting with people on a deeper level because she often just finds herself unable to sympathize with their experiences in life because they have been so different from hers. Beneath all of it, Ida has this seething sense of revenge that she doesn't know how to express. That's just it. When you push down on your emotions so much, what makes you human actually? There's only two possible outcomes. You either become the monster you hunt, or it all explodes when you least expect it. And so going into the LARP, I really thought, what is Ida's current emotional state? I knew Ida was struggling with her own emotions, or the lack thereof rather, and I really wanted to play into that during this LARP. I wanted her to have this emotional journey where things didn't have to come to an end yet. You know, it's a gradual process of someone who is suddenly faced with the reality that their entire life they've been taught to ignore a certain part of themselves, and now they're trying to get to know that part, but it's very difficult to unlearn habits and behaviors that you've been used to for decades now. There is a struggle between one part of Ida that finds it easiest to manipulate people and to keep them at a distance, and then another part that knows through her moral compass that that is actually a bad thing and that there are certain people she shouldn't manipulate because they just deserve better. When it comes to Ida, for me, it personally boils down to this person who has a playful and passionate demeanor, but a hard, cynical, cold truth beneath it all. Someone who thinks a world is rotten and that they are the ones who will protect those who need it, even if those people don't realize it themselves. They will get their hands dirty and they will use this gift in their eyes, this monster that they are, for good in whatever capacity they believe good to be. But then once their worldview is questioned, how will they react, you know? That's definitely a story that I'm interested in exploring with Ida, and that was the entire idea behind it. And I'm very excited to keep exploring that story as long as it's fitting with Ida throughout future LARPs and seeing what nice ending I can make of it. It's really a story about how redeemable is a person and what choices will they make when they're faced with the chance to redeem themselves. Will they have the strength to face that and try their best, or will they ignore it and take the easy way out? If you stuck through this video, thank you so much for being here with me, for just sitting down, listening to me yap about this character's backstory. I am truly passionate about sharing the stories behind my characters, and I hope you maybe learned something from the makeup tutorial part of it. And with that, stay safe, and I will see you in the next video.